Hello friends, welcome to the HFY Ode, where we bring you new science fiction stories, a new world, a new adventure. And yes, there is no robotic or AI voices here, only real human voices with real human touch. So let's start this journey, and please subscribe my channel if you like the stories and press the bell icon for the latest updates. Let's have a story. Okay.
They say the universe teaches you twice. Once when you're broken, and once when you learn why. Commander Chen thought he'd already learned. He was wrong. The observation deck smelled like recycled air and defeat. Commander David Chen stood with his forehead pressed against the viewport, watching the debris field spin past in lazy, mocking circles. 3 months ago, those fragments had been the UNSC Valiant, his ship, his crew, his responsibility. Now they were just expensive trash tumbling through the void. He'd stopped counting the pieces around week 2. "You are still performing this ritual." The voice came from behind him, all 6 syllables pronounced with that perfect, clinical Vahal precision that made everything sound like a medical diagnosis. Chen didn't turn. "It's called remembering, Ambassador Tiketh. May we do that sometimes?" Inefficient. Footsteps, 3 of them. The distinctive tripedal rhythm of Vahal locomotion. The incident occurred 87 standard cycles past. The data has been archived. The casualties have been processed. Your sustained focus on past events serves no functional purpose. The ambassador moved into Chen's peripheral vision, all 7 feet of crystalline exoskeleton catching the starlight. The Vahal looked like someone had crossbred a praying mantis with a cathedral. Beautiful in that terrible, cold way that made human instincts scream wrong, even while human minds whispered magnificent. 87 days, Chen said. "We count in days." A measurement based on your homeworld's rotational period. Parochial. Tiketh's head tilted in what might have been curiosity, or might have been disdain. With the Vahal, you never quite knew. "You comprehend this contributes to your species' limitations, yes?" Chen finally looked at the ambassador. "My limitations kept 400 people alive when your functionally superior navigation AI decided to route us through an active pulsar cluster. The route was optimal based on available data. The data was 3 years old. Time is everything when stellar phenomena are involved." Chen pushed off from the viewport. "But I'm sure that's just my parochial human thinking getting in the way of enlightenment." Tiketh's mandibles clicked. Amusement, maybe, or the vile equivalent of a condescending smile. "You deflect through hostility. Another inefficiency. Your species expends considerable energy on emotional responses to immutable circumstances." "Yeah, we're weird like that." Chen headed for the door. "Some of us actually feel things about our dead." "I did not suggest..." But Chen was already gone, the door hissing shut behind him with a sound like a sigh. The corridor outside was empty, which suited him fine. Chen had been avoiding people lately, human people anyway. Too many questions he couldn't answer. Too many expectations he couldn't meet. The Galactic Assembly had assigned him to Tiketh as a cultural liaison, which was diplomat speak for, "We need a human who won't punch aliens when they're being condescending." He'd wanted to refuse, should have refused. But Admiral Kowalski had looked at him with those tired eyes and said, "David, I need someone who's already been broken, someone who knows what it costs when we get it wrong." So here he was, broken, useful, perfect. The observation deck was in the aft section of the station. Waypoint Meridian, the assembly called it, as if giving it a fancy name made it less of a diplomatic holding pen. Chen's quarters were 3 levels up and 2 sections over, but he took the long way, the route that avoided the main concourse where different species mingled and pretended they understood each other. He passed a maintenance alcove where 2 creche engineers argued in their clicking, chittering language, all 4 of their arms gesturing in patterns that probably meant something to them. They barely glanced at him. Humans were common enough in the assembly now, not exotic, not threatening, just there. Furniture that occasionally talked back. 3 years since first contact. 3 years since humanity had stumbled out of its solar system like a kid walking into a room where adults were having a very serious conversation. The galaxy had barely blinked. Chen took a left at Junction 7, then another left into one of the service corridors that maintenance used when they didn't want to bother the important people. The lighting here was dimmer, the air colder. He liked it. Reminded him of the Valiant during night cycle, when most of the crew was sleeping and he could walk the decks alone, listening to the ship breathe. He hadn't been sleeping much lately. The corridor opened into one of the smaller cargo bays, currently empty except for some shipping containers stacked along the far wall. Chen had discovered this place during his second week on the station, when he'd been looking for somewhere quiet to exist. Nobody came here unless they had to. It was perfect. He sat on one of the containers, legs dangling, and pulled out the data slate he'd been carrying for 3 months. The casualty list glowed in the dim light. Names. 417 names. He knew them all now. Some he'd known before. Lieutenant Marcus Hayes, who could fix anything with duct tape and profanity. Ensign Sarah Kim, who made terrible coffee and worse jokes, but somehow always knew when someone needed to talk. Dr. Okoye, who delivered 3 babies in the ship's medbay and said each time that this was absolutely the last one. She was a trauma surgeon, not a midwife, and each time had cried anyway when the baby cried. Others he'd learned after. Crewman 3rd Class Jennifer Walsh, age 22, from Des Moines. Technician Ahmed Rashid, age 37, from Lagos. Go on and on. Names and ages and hometowns, each one a universe that had ended when the Valiant died. You know, most humans I observe don't torture themselves quite this systematically. Chen nearly dropped the slate. He looked up. She was leaning against one of the shipping containers about 10 feet away, arms crossed, watching him with an expression that managed to be both sympathetic and mildly amused. Human, maybe 30. Dark skin, hair pulled back in a practical bun that had mostly given up halfway through the day. She wore the grey and blue uniform of the Assembly's Science Division, but she wore it the way someone wears clothes they don't quite remember putting on, functionally, without attention. "I didn't hear you come in," Chen said. "I'm sneaky." She didn't move, just kept watching him. "Also, you were very focused on your self-flagellation routine. I could have driven a cargo hauler in here and you wouldn't have noticed. Are you going to tell me I should move on? That dwelling on the past is inefficient?" "God, no. That would be terrible therapy." She pushed off from the container and walked toward him, movements easy and unself-conscious. "I'm going to tell you that you're sitting in my spot." Chen blinked. "Your spot?" "My spot." She stopped a few feet away, gestured at the container he was sitting on. "I've been coming here for 6 months. Same container, same time of day, same existential crisis. You're disrupting my routine. I've been coming here for 2 weeks. I have seniority." They looked at each other. Chen felt something unexpected happening to his face. A muscle twitch, a weird tension in his cheeks. It took him a moment to identify it. He was almost smiling. "I could move," he said. "You could." She tilted her head, considering. "Or we could share. I'm Dr. Ava Okonkwo, xenobiology. You're Commander David Chen, the tragic figure Tiketh keeps complaining about." "Tiketh complains about me?" "Constantly. Says you're emotionally volatile and strategically unsound." She paused. "I told them that was called being human, and they should try it sometime." "How'd that go over?" "About as well as you'd expect." She hopped up onto the container beside him, leaving a respectful distance. Close enough to talk, far enough to not be intrusive. They gave me a 40-minute lecture on the statistical correlation between emotional processing and decision-making errors. I gave them a 20-minute lecture on the evolutionary advantages of emotional bonds in social species. We agreed to disagree, which in vile terms means they think I'm wrong, but too primitive to know it. Chen did smile then. "Couldn't help it." "You lecture to Keth?" "Someone has to. They're brilliant but insufferable." She glanced at the data slate in his hands, her expression softening. The Valiant? Yeah, I heard about that. I'm sorry. Everyone's sorry. The words came out harsher than he intended. He tried again. I mean, thank you, it's just, everyone says they're sorry, but nobody really gets it, and the ones who do get it don't say anything because what is there to say? And the whole thing is just this massive exhausting performance where you have to pretend you're healing when really you're just getting better at not showing the wound. Chen stared at her. She shrugged. I lost my research team 18 months ago. Different disaster, same nightmares. You develop a vocabulary. They sat in silence for a moment. The cargo bay's ventilation system hummed overhead, a low mechanical lullaby. How many? Ava asked quietly. 417. Jesus. Do you? Chen hesitated. Do you still think about yours? Every single day. She said it like it was the most natural thing in the world. I think about what Yuki would say about the latest Kresh biological survey. I think about how Marcus would have modified the containment protocols for the samples we're processing. I think about whether Elena would have liked the coffee in the commissary. A pause. It doesn't stop, but it changes. Gets less sharp, maybe. Or you get tougher around the edges. I don't feel tougher. Yeah, well, you're only 3 months in. Give it time. Teketh says focusing on the past serves no functional purpose. Teketh, Ava said with great precision, can go perform a biologically improbable act upon themselves. This time Chen actually laughed. It felt strange using those muscles, like operating machinery he'd forgotten he owned. Ava smiled at the sound. There you go, still human under all that guilt. Barely. Barely counts. She kicked her legs idly, heels thumping against the container. So, what brings you to my secret sad person spot on this fine station evening? Avoiding people? Same. Oh, people are exhausting. Especially aliens. Oh, especially aliens, Ava agreed. Don't get me wrong. I love my job. I'm fascinated by xenobiology. The diversity of life in the galaxy makes me want to weep with joy sometimes. But holy hell, the cultural miscommunications. Do you know how many times I've accidentally implied I wanted to engage in Threbian mating rituals just by asking someone to pass the salt? How many? 4. 4 separate incidents. There's now a notation in my file. Chen found himself relaxing, the knot in his chest loosening just slightly. Teketh thinks humans are inefficient. Teketh thinks everyone is inefficient. Their species achieved post-scarcity civilization 3,000 years ago. They've been smug about it ever since. She paused. Although between you and me, I think the Vajal are deeply or profoundly lonely, and they've just intellectualized it into philosophy. That's, Chen considered. Actually, that makes a disturbing amount of sense. I contain multitudes. Ava checked something on her wrist display, sighed. I should probably get back. I've got a meeting with the Kresh delegation about their proposal to introduce their waste processing organisms into the station ecosystem. Should I be worried about that? Only if you're deeply attached to your current gut bacteria. She hopped down from the container. We're still negotiating. The Kresh are very enthusiastic about biological integration. It's endearing and mildly horrifying. She started to walk away, then stopped, turned back. Commander Chen? David, he said. Just David. David. She smiled. You can keep the spot. I'll find another container. You don't have to. I'm adaptable. Comes with the job. She headed for the door, then called over her shoulder. Also, if you ever want to talk about dead people with someone who won't tell you it's inefficient, I'm usually in Lab 7. Bring coffee, and I'll tell you about the time I made a Vral cry. Vral can cry? Metaphorically, it involved a lot of clicking, and what I'm pretty sure were crystalline tears of frustrated rage. Then she was gone, the door sliding shut behind her with that same sighing sound. Chen sat alone in the cargo bay, the casualty list still glowing in his hands. But somehow, the weight felt different. Not lighter, the name still mattered, would always matter. but maybe shared, maybe less like drowning and more like carrying. He looked at the list one more time, and then powered down the slate. Tomorrow, he'd come back. Tomorrow, he'd remember. Tonight, maybe, he'd try sleeping. The meeting room was too bright and too cold, which seemed to be standard for any space the Galactic Assembly designated as official. Chen sat in one of the human-sized chairs. The assembly was getting better about accommodations at least, and tried not to stare at the delegation seated across the table. Teketh was there, of course, all crystalline superiority and perfect posture. But they'd brought friends. To Teketh's right sat Ambassador Vex, a Threbian who looked like someone had given an octopus too much caffeine and a crash course in bureaucracy. Their tentacles kept moving in patterns Chen was pretty sure meant something insulting. To Teketh's left was Councillor Jara, Isa Kresh, whose chitinous plating gleamed under the harsh lights. The Kresh were the most physically intimidating species Chen had encountered. 8 feet tall, 4 arms, faces that looked like nightmares designed by committee. But Jara had kind eyes, if you knew how to read the subtle glow patterns in their compound vision. "Commander Chen," Teketh began, and Chen felt his shoulders tense automatically. "We have reviewed your preliminary report on the incident." "The disaster," Chen corrected. "The mass casualty event. The incident," Teketh repeated, with that inflection that made it clear the word choice was deliberate, "occurred due to a confluence of factors, primary among them being outdated navigational data," Chen interrupted, "which your systems provided." Vex's tentacles rippled. In Threbian, that was laughter. "The human exhibits hostility. How quaint." "The human," Chen said evenly, "exhibits an unwillingness to watch people die and then get blamed for it." "No one is assigning blame," Jara said, their voice surprisingly gentle. The Kresh had 3 vocal chambers, and Jara used them to create harmonics that were almost soothing. "We seek to understand causation so that such tragedies do not repeat." "Then understand this." Chen leaned forward. "Your AI said the route was safe. We trusted that. 417 people trusted that. And now they're gone because nobody bothered to update a database. The database," Teketh said, "is updated on a standard cycle determined by bureaucracy, by procedure, by whatever makes sense to species that don't die when things go wrong." Silence fell across the table. Vex's tentacles went still. That was bad. When Threbians stopped moving, it meant they were actually paying attention. "You presume," Teketh said slowly, "that we do not understand mortality. I presume you don't understand urgency." Chen looked at each of them in turn. "Your species achieved faster-than-light travel 3,000 years ago. The Threbia have had post-scarcity economics for 5 millennia. Even the Kresh, no offense, Counselor, have been spacefaring for longer than humans have had written language." "None taken," Jara murmured. "You've had time to perfect everything, to optimize, to remove risk." Chen felt the words coming faster now, propelled by something he couldn't name. "We haven't. We're still figuring out how not to kill ourselves every time we leave our own star system. So when your systems fail, when your data is wrong, when your procedures don't account for variables, we die." "A differential time perspective," Teketh observed. "Interesting. It's not a perspective, it's a fact." Chen stood. "And if that makes me inefficient or emotional or whatever else you want to call it, fine. But don't sit there and tell me the incident was just a confluence of factors when what it really was is proof that your perfect systems forgot to account for species that are still learning." He walked out before they could respond. The corridor outside was blessedly empty. Chen leaned against the wall, breathing hard, hands shaking. That had been stupid. Spectacularly stupid. You didn't lecture Galactic Assembly ambassadors. You didn't. "David!" He looked up. Ava was walking toward him from the other end of the corridor, lab coat fluttering, and an expression on her face that was equal parts concern and something that might have been pride. "How much of that did you hear?" he asked. "Pretty much all of it. The acoustics in this section are terrible." She stopped in front of him. Also, I was standing right outside the door because I had a feeling you were going to do something either very brave or very stupid, and I wanted to be ready to extract you. Which was it? Bit of both, honestly. She tilted her head. You okay? I just committed career suicide. Maybe. Or maybe you said something 3 years of human diplomats have been too polite to say. She paused. Ticketh looked like you'd slapped them with a philosophical paradox. It was beautiful. They're going to have me reassigned. Possibly. Or... Ava's wrist display chimed. She glanced at it, frowned. Uh-huh. What? Ticketh just sent a station-wide memo. They're calling an emergency session of the Assembly's Safety Commission. She looked up at Chen. They're proposing real-time database updates for all navigation systems, mandatory cross-verification protocols, and, wait, they're requesting a human advisory position on temporal risk assessment. Chen stared. What? You got through to them? Ava smiled. You made them think. I made them. Chen felt something shift in his chest. Not healing, not yet. But maybe the start of something. I don't understand. The Val value logic above everything else. And what you gave them was logical. Humans experience time differently. Therefore, risk assessments need human input. They can't argue with that without contradicting their own philosophy. She touched his arm lightly. You didn't commit career suicide, David. You did your job. Maybe for the first time since you got here. The door behind them hissed open. Jara emerged, moving with that peculiar creche grace that made 8 feet of armored insect somehow seem delicate. Commander Chen, they said, harmonics rippling through the words. Ambassador Ticketh requests your presence at the commission session. They wish to discuss your temporal risk assessment framework in detail. Chen looked at Ava. She grinned. Go on, she said. I'll be in Lab 7 when you're done. You can tell me all about how you accidentally revolutionized galactic safety protocols. I didn't. You did. She was already walking away. And David? Stop thinking it's over. It's just beginning. The commission session lasted 6 hours. Chen had expected interrogation, maybe hostility. What he got instead was the most intense philosophical debate he'd ever witnessed, conducted across 5 species and 9 different communication modalities. The Va'al wanted quantitative frameworks. The Threbians wanted contextual flexibility. The Kresh wanted biological risk metrics. 2 other species Chen barely knew wanted things he didn't fully understand. And through it all, they kept coming back to him. Commander Chen, from a human perspective, what is the acceptable threshold for navigational uncertainty? There is no acceptable threshold when lives are at stake. But surely statistical models? Statistics don't comfort families. They don't bring people back. Over and over. They'd ask analytical questions and he'd give human answers. And each time they'd pause like he'd said something profound instead of just obvious. Ticketh spoke last. Your species, they said, standing with that perfect crystalline stillness, experiences time as scarcity. Each moment is valuable because there are only so many. This creates what we would term urgency bias. Yes, Chen said, too tired to argue. We would term it bias. You would term it... what? Chen thought about the Valiant. About 417 names. About Ava sitting in a cargo bay, remembering her dead. Respect, he said finally. We'd call it respect. Ticketh's mandibles clicked. But this time, Chen thought he understood the sound. Agreement. The Commission, Ticketh announced, will implement Commander Chen's temporal risk assessment protocols across all Assembly navigation systems. Implementation begins immediately. They looked at Chen, and for the first time, their multifaceted eyes seemed to hold something other than analytical distance. Your species, Ticketh said quietly, is imperfect, inefficient, emotionally volatile, but perhaps... A pause. Perhaps there is wisdom in urgency. In the respect you show your dead. Chen felt something break open in his chest. Not healing. Not yet. But maybe the start. Thank you, he managed. Do not thank me. The logic is sound. Teketh tilted their head. Also, Dr. Okonkwo indicated that if we did not treat you with appropriate respect, she would introduce creche waste processing organisms into our atmospheric systems. The creche delegation finds this proposal fascinating. We do not. Despite everything, the exhaustion, the grief, the sheer unreality of the past 6 hours, Chen laughed. Teketh's mandibles clicked again. Definitely agreement. Chen found Ava in Lab 7 at 0300 station time, exactly where she said she'd be. She was peering into some kind of containment unit, making notes on a data slate, humming something that might have been music if it had any relationship to melody. "You're still up," Chen said from the doorway. She didn't look up. Sleep is for people who don't have 7 different bacterial cultures reaching critical mass simultaneously. She made another note. "How'd the session go?" "They're implementing everything. Real-time updates, verification protocols, human advisory positions." He stepped into the lab. "Teketh said you threatened them with creche organisms." "I implied certain biological consequences might occur if they didn't acknowledge your expertise. There's a difference." Now she did look up, grinning. "Also, it worked. So I'm calling it good science communication. That's not David." She set down the slate. "You changed policy across the entire Galactic Assembly in one afternoon. That's what your tragedy brought. That's what 417 people's deaths might prevent from happening to someone else." Her expression softened. "It doesn't make it okay. Nothing makes it okay. But maybe it makes it mean something." Chen felt his throat tighten. "I don't know if I can—" "You don't have to know. You just have to keep going." She walked over to him, close enough that he could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the grief she carried as expertly as he did. One day at a time, one crisis at a time, one horrible diplomatic session at a time. Is that what you do? Every single day. She smiled. "Although I've got better drugs than you." "Xenobiology perks," he smiled back. Felt it reach his eyes this time. "Thank you," he said, "for everything. The cargo bay, the extraction threat, the biological terrorism." "Biological diplomacy," Ava corrected. "And you're welcome." She paused. "Also, I'm having dinner with the creche delegation tomorrow night. Want to come? It's mostly food you can't pronounce and conversation you can't follow, but Jara tells excellent stories about their homeworld's predator migration patterns." That sounds... Chen realized he was actually considering it. "Weird. Very weird. I'm in." "Excellent. Bring your appetite and an open mind. The creche consider it rude if you don't try everything at least twice." Chen headed for the door, feeling lighter than he had in months. Not healed, not whole, but maybe, possibly, beginning. "David?" He turned, and Ava was watching him with that same expression she'd had in the cargo bay, sympathy and steel in equal measure. "He thought it was over," she said quietly, but she knew it was just beginning. Chen felt the words settle into his chest like truth. "Yeah," he said, "I'm starting to figure that out." He left her there, humming her non-melody, cataloguing her bacteria, carrying her dead with the same careful attention he carried his. Tomorrow, the work would continue. The protocols would be implemented. The assembly would adjust, adapt, accommodate this strange new species that measured time in heartbeats and valued every single one. Tomorrow, he'd remember the valiant. But tonight, for the first time in 87 days, David Chen thought he might actually sleep. The universe teaches you twice. First when you're broken, and then when you learn what to build from the pieces. The creche ate with purpose. Chen sat at a table that had been lowered approximately 8 inches to accommodate human proportions. Considerate, though it made him feel like a child at the grown-ups table. Around him, the creche delegation consumed their meal with methodical efficiency, each movement precise and deliberate. Forearms provided excellent multitasking opportunities. "The protein synthesis is optimal," Jara was saying, gesturing with 2 hands while eating with the other 2. We harvest during the third moon phase when the organisms reach peak nutritional density. Ava nodded enthusiastically, something purple and vaguely gelatinous quivering on her fork. And the enzymatic breakdown, you're using thermal processing or chemical? Both in sequence. The thermal phase denatures the primary proteins, then enzymatic digestion. Chen had stopped following the conversation somewhere around optimal. He focused instead on the food, which was actually better than he'd expected. The creche were carnivorous, but they'd made accommodations, some kind of grain analogue, vegetables that were probably vegetables, and a protein that tasted like chicken in the same way that everything humanity encountered in space seemed to taste like chicken. Commander Chen. A creche he didn't recognize leaned toward him, mandibles clicking softly. You appear contemplative. Is the meal unsatisfactory? No, it's good. Just thinking. About the implementation protocols? This from another creche, smaller than Jara, but with more elaborate chitin patterning. The temporal risk assessment framework has generated considerable discussion among our navigation specialists. Has it? Chen set down his fork. What kind of discussion? The productive kind. Jara's eyes glowed with what Chen had learned to recognize as creche approval. Your species' perspective on urgency, it challenges assumptions we did not realize we held. Like what? Like the assumption that longer-lived species possess inherently superior judgment. The smaller creche, her name was Kalesh, Chen remembered now, tilted her head. The creche live approximately 200 of your years. The Val considerably longer. We believed this granted us wisdom. Doesn't it? Wisdom, perhaps, but not necessarily urgency. Kalesh picked up something that looked disturbingly like a live insect and consumed it with evident pleasure. When you have 2 centuries, you can afford to be patient. When you have 60 or 70 years, every moment counts, Chen finished quietly. Precisely. Jara's harmonics shifted into something that sounded almost reverent. It is a different kind of wisdom, one we had not considered. Ava caught Chen's eye across the table, smiled. She'd been right. This was weird, but it was also something else. It was possibility. Commander Chen, Kalesh said, if I may ask a question of a personal nature. Chen tensed reflexively. Depends on the question. The casualties from your vessel, do you truly remember all of them? The table went quiet. Even the creche stopped eating, which Chen suspected was significant. He could deflect, should deflect. This was supposed to be a pleasant dinner, not a therapy session. Yes, he said instead. All 417. That seems... Kalesh paused, mandibles working. Forgive me. Among my people, we honor our dead collectively. Individual remembrance beyond immediate family is considered excessive. Inefficient? Chen asked, without heat. I was going to say painful. But yes, inefficient as well. Chen thought about the cargo bay, about the data slate he still carried everywhere, about names and ages and hometowns. It is painful, he said. It's also necessary. For me, anyway, maybe for all humans. He picked up his fork, put it down again. We don't have 200 years. We don't have perfect memory storage or collective consciousness or whatever other advantages longer-lived species have. What we have is now, this moment, and the people in it. Even the dead people, Kalesh asked. Especially the dead people. Jara made a sound Chen had never heard before. A low, resonant hum that seemed to vibrate through the table itself. That, they said softly, is the most creche thing I have ever heard a human say. Chen blinked. I thought you just said you don't do individual remembrance. We don't, but we believe in the weight of the present moment, the sanctity of now. Jara's eyes glowed brighter. It is our oldest teaching. The past feeds the present, and the present births the future. Your species seems to understand this instinctively. We do. You carry your dead forward. You let them shape your decisions. You refuse to forget, even when forgetting would be more comfortable. Jara gestured with all four arms, a movement of surprising elegance. That is respect for the present moment. That is understanding that now matters, because it is all we ever truly have. Ava was watching Chen with an expression he couldn't quite read. The conversation shifted after that, moving to lighter topics: creche art, human music, the ongoing debate about whether Threbian literature could even be considered literature when it was primarily chemical signaling. Chen participated, laughed at appropriate moments, tried the purple gelatinous thing, and immediately regretted it. But his mind kept returning to what Jara had said. The past feeds the present, and the present births the future. Maybe that was it. Maybe that was what he'd been doing wrong these past 3 months. He'd been living in the past, dwelling there, making a home in the wreckage. But what if the point wasn't to move on? What if it was to carry forward? To let the dead shape the living without being consumed by them? David. Ava's voice. Quiet. She'd moved to sit beside him while he'd been lost in thought. You good? Yeah, actually, I think I am. Jara got to you. Is it that obvious? You've got that look people get when they realize something important and aren't sure what to do with it yet. She took a sip of whatever the creche were drinking. It looked like liquid silver and probably tasted like regret. Want to talk about it? Not yet. Still processing. Fair enough. She settled back in her chair. You know, when I first started coming to these dinners, I thought it was about learning alien cultures, understanding their biology, their customs, their worldviews. It's not? Oh, it is. But it's also about them learning us. She gestured at the table. Are at the creche, still eating and talking and living. We're the new species, the babies. We've been in space for 3 years and we're still figuring out basic navigation. They should dismiss us. Some of them do. Some, but not all. And the ones who don't, they're learning that maybe being young isn't the same as being wrong. She looked at him. You taught Teketh that today. That human urgency isn't a flaw. It's a feature. Chen thought about that. About urgency and efficiency and the weight of moments. I need to do something, he said abruptly. Ava raised an eyebrow. Right now, we haven't even gotten to dessert. The creche do this thing with fermented. Tomorrow, I need to propose something to the commission. The idea was forming even as he spoke, pieces clicking together. The temporal risk assessment, it's a start, but it's reactive. We're fixing problems after they happen. As opposed to teaching, sharing, actually integrating human perspectives into galactic systems instead of just consulting us when things go wrong. Ava set down her drink. You want to create a formal exchange program. Something like that. Humans embedded in alien institutions, aliens embedded in human ones. Not as observers, as equals, as partners. The words were coming faster now. The Vahal have 3,000 years of technological advancement. The creche have biological engineering we can't even imagine. The Threbians have social systems that... And we have urgency, and grief, and the ability to make terrible decisions very quickly under pressure. Chen grinned. Exactly. It's a fair trade. David Chen. Are you proposing we weaponize human dysfunction? I'm proposing we acknowledge that dysfunction and perfection are matter of perspective. That what looks like chaos to a Va'al might look like adaptability to a human. Jara had been listening. Of course they had. Creche hearing was exceptional. An exchange program, they said thoughtfully. Humans in assembly institutions. Assembly species in human ones. It would require significant coordination, Kalesh added. Cultural training, safety protocols. The potential for misunderstanding is substantial. The potential for understanding is bigger, Chen said. Right now, we're all operating from assumptions. You assume humans are reckless because we move fast. We assume aliens are cold because you think long-term. But maybe if we actually worked together, or actually integrated, we'd learn that recklessness is sometimes courage, Jara finished, and long-term thinking is sometimes wisdom. Or maybe we just learned that we're all making it up as we go, Ava said, just on different timescales. The table had gone quiet again. But this time, it wasn't the heavy silence of discomfort. It was the productive silence of people thinking. Kailesh spoke first. The Kresh Science Institute would participate. We have been seeking human consultation on several biointegration projects. A formal exchange would be beneficial. The Navigation Commission would require human advisors regardless. Another Kresh added, "Your protocols are now mandatory. We will need humans who understand the implementation." Jara's eyes glowed. "I will propose this to the Assembly. But Commander Chen, you should be the one to present it. You have, what is the human expression? The standing? Credibility," Ava supplied. "He's got credibility now. Nothing says, 'Listen to me,' like completely dismantling diplomatic protocol and being right about it." Chen felt something shift in his chest again. That same feeling from the commission session, but bigger now, clearer. Purpose, not healing, not yet. Maybe not ever, but purpose. "I'll present it," he said. "When?" 2 days hence, the full assembly convenes." Jara made that humming sound again. "This is good, Commander Chen. This is how change begins." Chen spent the next day preparing. He requisitioned a workspace, one of the small briefing rooms that nobody used because the climate control made it approximately the temperature of a freezer. He filled it with data slates and projection screens, and enough coffee to give a small army heart palpitations. Ava found him there at 1400 hours, surrounded by charts and statistics and half-written proposals. "You haven't slept," she observed. "I had coffee. It's basically the same thing." "It's objectively not." She set down a container of something that smelled edible. "I brought food. Real food, not the cafeteria's interpretation of nutrition." Chen's stomach growled. He couldn't remember the last time he'd eaten. "What is it?" he asked. "Curry. I made it in my quarters. The spices are all Earth standard. I've got a supplier who smuggles real ingredients from the Sol shipments." She unpacked the container, steam rising. "Eat. Then tell me about your presentation." The curry was incredible. Chen ate while he talked, gesturing with his fork. "The core argument is simple. Integration benefits everyone. Humans get access to technology and knowledge we're centuries away from developing on our own. Assembly species get fresh perspectives on problems they've been stuck on for generations." "You're assuming we have fresh perspectives." "We do. We're chaotic and emotional, and we make terrible decisions under pressure. But we also improvise like nobody's business. We find creative solutions because we don't know enough to understand why things are impossible." Ava smiled. "Ignorance as innovation. I like it." "It's not ignorance, it's..." Chen paused. "Okay, it's partially ignorance, but it's also optimism. Hope, and the belief that problems are solvable even when all the data says they're not. You're describing the human condition as a strategic advantage. Aren't you doing the same thing in your work? Using human biology as a baseline for understanding alien systems? That's different. That's science. This is science too. Social science. Cultural exchange as experimental methodology." Chen pulled up a projection, statistics and demographic models floating in the air between them. "Look, here's the data on assembly innovation over the past millennium. It's slowing. Not dramatically, but measurably. New breakthroughs are taking longer. Solutions are more incremental. Because they've solved most of the obvious problems. Or because they've optimized themselves into stagnation." Chen highlighted a section of the data. "And the Vaal haven't had a major paradigm shift in their physics in 800 years. The Threbians haven't reconsidered their social contract in 3000. Even the Kresh, and they're the most adaptable, even they're showing signs of institutional calcification." Ava leaned forward, studying the numbers. "You think human chaos can break that pattern? I think human chaos is already breaking it. Look at what happened with the navigation protocols. One conversation, one emotional, illogical, completely human conversation, and suddenly the entire assembly is rethinking safety standards that have been in place for centuries. That's one data point. It's a proof of concept. Chen gestured at another projection. And here, Zhara mentioned bio-integration projects. The creche have been trying to solve a symbiosis problem for 20 years. 20 years of their best scientists throwing everything they have at it. And you think a human could solve it? I think a human might ask a stupid question that leads to a solution the creche never considered because they were too knowledgeable to ask stupid questions. Ava laughed. You're actually serious. Completely serious. Chen met her eyes. You did it. Your research team, before? What were you working on? Her expression shifted. Not quite pain, but the echo of it. Cross-species neural mapping, she said quietly, trying to understand how different brain structures process similar stimuli. And you made progress? Some. We found patterns nobody expected. Similarities between species that shouldn't have been similar. She paused. Marcus, one of my team. He was a musician, no formal neuroscience training. But he kept asking questions about rhythm and pattern recognition. And eventually, we realized that musical structure maps onto neural processing in ways the neuroscientists hadn't considered. Yeah, her voice went soft. He's the one who figured out the Threbian emotional response patterns. Pure pattern recognition. No theoretical framework. Just listening. That's what I mean. Chen felt the certainty settling into his bones. That's exactly what I mean. We need more of that. More stupid questions from people who don't know enough to stay quiet. More fresh eyes on old problems. More humans making aliens uncomfortable. More everyone making everyone uncomfortable. That's how you know you're learning. Ava was quiet for a moment, her gaze distant. Marcus would have loved this, she said finally. With the idea that his stupid questions might become policy. They will, if I can sell it to the assembly. You will. She said it with complete confidence. You've got the data, the argument, and, most importantly, you've already proven you're willing to piss off people who need pissing off. Chen grinned. High praise. I contain multitudes. She stood, started gathering the empty food containers. Finish your presentation. Sleep for at least 4 hours. Shower, then go change the galaxy. That's a lot of pressure. You've handled worse. She headed for the door, then stopped. David? Yeah? Your crew, the Valiant, they died because systems failed, because procedures weren't good enough, because nobody thought to ask the right questions. Chen felt his throat tighten. If this works, Ava continued, if you actually pull this off, you'll have turned that disaster into something that saves lives. Maybe thousands of lives. Maybe more. She met his eyes. That doesn't make it okay. It never makes it okay. But it makes it mean something. She left before he could respond. Chen sat alone in the freezing briefing room, surrounded by data and proposals and possibility. 417 names. He thought about each one. Let himself feel the weight. Then he got back to work. The assembly chamber was designed to accommodate 17 different species simultaneously, which meant it looked like someone had crossbred an amphitheater with a fever dream. Chen stood at the central podium, human height, mercifully, and looked out at the delegates. Vahal in their crystalline towers, Threbians in their fluid-filled observation spheres, a creche on their elevated platforms, and a dozen other species he was still learning to identify, each in their own specialized seating. His heart was doing something interesting in his chest, something that felt like panic, but might have been excitement. Tiketh spoke first, their voice resonating through the translation matrix. Commander Chen has requested time to address the assembly. His proposal concerns institutional integration and cultural exchange. The floor is his. Chen activated his presentation. Charts and graphs materialized in the air, scaled and positioned for optimal viewing across all the different species' sensory ranges. Thank you, Ambassador Tiketh. His voice sounded steadier than he felt. 2 days ago, this assembly implemented new navigation protocols based on human temporal risk assessment, Those protocols will save lives. They already represent a significant shift in how we approach safety in space. He paused. Let that settle. But they're not enough. Murmurs rippled through the chamber, or whatever the non-verbal equivalent was for species that communicated through bioluminescence or chemical signals. They're not enough, Chen continued, because they're reactive. We identified a problem, we fixed it. That's good, but it's not transformative. If we want actual innovation, if we want to solve problems before they become disasters, we need more than consultation. We need integration. He pulled up the first data set. This shows assembly innovation metrics over the past 1,000 years. You'll notice a pattern. Breakthroughs are slowing. Not stopping, but slowing. Whereas the curve is flattening. An inevitable consequence of approaching theoretical limits, someone said. Chen thought it might be one of the Valkyrie, but he wasn't sure. Is it? Chen challenged. Or is it the consequence of institutional optimization? You've solved the easy problems. You've removed inefficiency from your systems. You've created perfect institutions. You speak as though perfection were a flaw, Teketh observed. I speak as though perfection might be stagnation wearing a fancy hat. Chen switched to the next projection. My species has been spacefaring for 3 years. 3 years. In that time, we've had more disasters, failures, and near extinctions than most assembly species have experienced in millennia. Not a compelling advertisement for human competence, someone muttered. No, Chen agreed. But here's the thing. We learn fast. We adapt. We improvise. We ask stupid questions and stumble into solutions you'd never consider because we don't know enough to know they're impossible. He highlighted a section of data. The Kresh have been working on biosymbiosis integration for 20 years. The Vaal have been stuck on certain physics paradoxes for 8 centuries. The Threbians can't figure out how to modify their social contracts without destabilizing their entire civilization. And you propose that humans can solve these problems? Teketh's tone was carefully neutral. I propose that humans might ask the questions that lead to solutions. Not because we're smarter, we're objectively not, but because we're ignorant and optimistic and we don't know when to quit. He felt the chamber shift. Not agreement, not yet, but attention. What I'm proposing is a formal exchange program. Humans embedded in assembly institutions as full participants, not consultants. Assembly species embedded in human institutions the same way. Working together, learning from each other, making each other deeply uncomfortable on a regular basis. Discomfort is not typically a goal of institutional design, the Valkyrie delegate said dryly. It should be. Comfort is where innovation goes to die. Chen pulled up another projection, this one showing proposed exchange frameworks. We start small, 10 positions, split evenly. Humans in assembly roles, assembly species in human roles. Full integration, real authority, actual partnership. And what do humans bring to this exchange beyond enthusiasm and chaos? Teketh asked. Chen smiled. Besides chaos, we bring urgency. We bring the perspective of a species that doesn't have time to waste on problems that might be solvable. We bring creativity born from desperation. We bring the ability to fail fast and learn faster. The ability to fail, Teketh repeated. Again, not compelling. Failure is data. Failure is how you know you're pushing boundaries. Chen felt the words flowing now, powered by certainty. Your species achieved post-scarcity 3,000 years ago. You haven't had to struggle for resources, for survival, for existence. That's made you wise. But it's also made you cautious. Caution preserves lives, Jara said, their harmonics thoughtful. It does. It also prevents risks. And some problems require risk to solve. Chen switched to his final projection, the one he'd been building toward. Here's my proposal. 10 positions, a 1-year terms, renewable. Humans in assembly institutions, assembly species in human ones. Full integration, full authority. At the end of the year, we assess results. If it works, if we see innovation, breakthrough, genuine collaboration, we expand. If it doesn't, we will have wasted a year, Teketh finished. You'll have wasted a year. I'll have proven my species is as chaotic and useless as some of you think we are. Chen met Teketh's faceted gaze. But if I'm right, if this works, you'll have opened up new possibilities you've been locked out of for centuries. Silence fell across the chamber. Chen felt his heart hammering. This was it. He'd made his argument. Now they'd either buy it or they'd politely dismiss him and go back to their perfect, stagnant systems. Jara spoke first. The Kresh Science Institute supports this proposal. We have already discussed potential integration with Commander Chen. We believe the exchange would be mutually beneficial. The Threbian Cultural Ministry also supports, another voice added. We have been seeking fresh perspectives on social contract modifications. Human input could prove valuable. One by one, delegates voiced support. Not all of them. There were objections, concerns, requests for modifications. But more support than Chen had dared hope for. Teketh was the last to speak. The Vahal delegation has reservations, they said. This proposal introduces variables that are difficult to quantify. The potential for disruption is significant. Chen's heart sank. However, Teketh continued, and Chen felt hope flicker back to life. Disruption may be precisely what is required. The commander is correct. Our innovation metrics show concerning trends. If human chaos can address this stagnation, they paused. The Vaal delegation supports the proposal, conditionally. Conditionally? Chen asked. We will participate, but we reserve the right to modify or terminate the exchange if results do not meet established metrics. Teketh's mandibles clicked. Also, Dr. Okonkwo has indicated that failure to support this initiative will result in, I believe the phrase was, biological consequences of a deeply unpleasant nature. Laughter rippled through the chamber, or whatever passed for laughter, among species that didn't have traditional vocal apparatus. Chen looked up into the observation gallery. Ava was there, grinning like a maniac, giving him a thumbs up. The proposal is accepted, Teketh announced. Its implementation will begin within 30 standard cycles. Commander Chen will coordinate human participation. Ambassador Jara will coordinate assembly participation. We will reconvene in 1 year to assess outcomes. The session concluded with the usual formalities. Delegations filing out, translation matrices powering down, the chamber slowly emptying. Chen stood at the podium, feeling strangely hollow. He'd done it. Actually done it. Turned disaster into policy. Turned grief into purpose. It didn't make the valiant okay. It didn't bring anyone back. But maybe, possibly, it meant they hadn't died for nothing. David. He looked up. Ava was walking toward him across the empty chamber, her footsteps echoing. You did it, she said when she reached him. We did it. You and Jara and... No, she cut him off gently. You did this. You took your trauma and you turned it into something that might actually change the galaxy. That's... Her voice caught. That's what Marcus would have done. What any of my team would have done. What you did, Chen said. You've been doing this all along. The research, the cultural work, the biological terrorism. Diplomacy. The biological diplomacy. You've been building bridges while I was just trying not to drown. You were doing exactly what you needed to do. You were surviving, and now... She gestured at the chamber. Now you're doing more than surviving. You're building. Chen felt something break open in his chest. Not healing, not yet. But maybe the beginning of it. Thank you, he said. For everything. The cargo bay, the curry, the threats. You're welcome. And David? Yeah? He thought it was over. Her smile was soft. But she knew it was just beginning. Chen smiled back. I'm really starting to believe that. They walked out of the chamber together, into a future neither of them could predict, but both of them were ready to build. Behind them, the stars turned. Ahead of them, possibility waited. And 417 names travelled forward, carried with honor into whatever came next. 6 months later, Chen stood in the Vahal Computational Institute and tried not to have an existential crisis. The building defied architecture. Crystalline structures spiraled upward in patterns that hurt to look at directly, each surface reflecting and refracting light in ways that suggested the laws of physics were more like gentle suggestions here. The Vaal had built this place 3,000 years ago, and it still looked like it had arrived from tomorrow. Commander Chen. A Vaal researcher approached, smaller than Teketh, younger maybe, though Chen had learned that age was complicated when you lived for millennia. I am researcher Vathena. You are early. Human habit. We tend to overcompensate for uncertainty. Vathena's mandibles clicked. Amusement, Chen had learned. An efficient strategy. Please follow. They walked through corridors that seemed to shift when Chen wasn't looking directly at them. Optical illusions, probably. Or Vial architecture operating on principles he didn't understand. At this point, both were equally likely. Your human counterpart arrives tomorrow, Vathena said. Dr. Sarah Voss. Her credentials are impressive. I haven't met her yet. The selection committee handled placements. She specializes in quantum computational theory, an appropriate match for our current project difficulties. Vathena paused at a doorway that irised open with a sound like singing crystal. We have been attempting to model multi-dimensional probability matrices for 847 years. 800? Chen stopped. Years? The mathematics are complex. We have made progress, but certain paradoxes remain unsolvable. Vathena gestured him into the room beyond. We are hoping human intuition might provide novel approaches. The lab was enormous. Crystalline computation matrices floated in suspension fields, each one processing data in ways that made Chen's eyes water. Vral researchers moved between the arrays, their movements precise and synchronized. In the center of it all, someone had set up a very human desk. Coffee maker. Data slates. A small plant that was definitely dying, but trying very hard not to. We prepared workspace, Vathena said, based on human ergonomic requirements and psychological comfort parameters. Chen felt something warm in his chest. You built me a desk. We built you a workstation. The designation desk is imprecise but acceptable. Vathena's head tilted. You appear emotionally affected. Is the preparation inadequate? No, it's... Chen touched the desk, the simple human normalcy of it. It's thoughtful, thank you. Gratitude is unnecessary. Optimal working conditions benefit the project. But Vathena's mandibles clicked again, softer this time. They were learning. All of them. Slowly, awkwardly, but learning. Chen spent the first week mostly confused. The Vaal computational models operated on principles that made quantum mechanics look straightforward. Probability matrices that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously. Calculations that required factoring in timeline variations. Mathematical frameworks that Chen was pretty sure violated causality at least 3 times before breakfast. Dr. Voss arrived on schedule. A compact woman in her 50s with grey streaking through black hair and the kind of eyes that suggested she'd seen enough academic nonsense to be permanently unimpressed. Commander Chen. She shook his hand firmly. Sarah Voss, they tell me you're the guy who made the Vial reconsider their entire approach to temporal dynamics. I wouldn't say I made them. Teketh sent me 17 pages of analysis on human urgency bias. 17 pages. From Teketh. She grinned. You definitely made them reconsider something. They fell into an easy partnership. Sarah understood the mathematics in ways Chen never would, but Chen had the operational experience, the practical knowledge of what happened when theory met reality at high velocity. The paradox is here, Sarah said 3 days later, gesturing at a probability matrix that looked like frozen lightning. See how the timeline branches collapse when we try to model past a certain threshold? Chen studied the display. It's like they're avoiding something. Avoiding is anthropomorphization. They're mathematical constructs. They don't avoid... They follow rules. Okay, then the rules are creating an exclusion zone. He pulled up historical data. Look, every time the Vaal try to model past this point, the calculation fails. Not errors, not approximations, complete failure. Because the mathematics become inconsistent. Or because the mathematics are trying to tell you something and you keep not listening. Sarah raised an eyebrow. That's not how math works. Isn't it? Chen felt the idea forming, intuition without structure. What if the paradox isn't a bug? What if it's a feature? What if the timelines are supposed to collapse at that point? That would violate... Sarah stopped, stared at the display. Wait what? That would violate our assumptions about continuous probability space. But if we assumed discrete probability thresholds, if certain outcomes were fundamentally excluded from possibility, her fingers flew over the interface, pulling up new calculations. Holy shit. Good holy shit or bad holy shit? Maybe revolutionary holy shit. She was grinning now, that fierce academic joy of someone who'd just seen a problem crack open. The Vaal have been trying to model this as continuous space because they assume all outcomes are theoretically possible. But what if some outcomes are causally forbidden? Not unlikely, impossible. Like dividing by zero. Exactly like dividing by zero. You can't model it because it's not a number, it's a category error. She pulled up more data, feeding it into the revised framework. If we treat the collapse points as exclusion zones rather than mathematical failures, the probability matrix reformed. Where there had been chaos and contradiction, suddenly there were patterns. Clear, obvious patterns that resolved into stable predictions. Vathina appeared at Chen's elbow so silently, he jumped. You have modified the calculation framework, they observed. We stopped trying to solve the paradox, Sarah said, still focused on the display. Started treating it as information instead. The paradox contains information about what cannot occur, not what can, Chen added. Once you account for that, the model stabilizes. Vathina moved closer, their crystalline form refracting the display light into rainbow fragments. This is unexpected. Good unexpected? Chen asked. Potentially revolutionary unexpected. Vathina's mandibles clicked rapidly. Excitement, Chen had learned. Real, actual excitement. We have been approaching this incorrectly for 8 centuries. 8 centuries of attempting to force consistency where inconsistency was the answer. Not inconsistency, Sarah corrected gently. Categorical exclusion. The math is still consistent. We just had the wrong categories. Show me. Vathina pulled up additional interfaces, their movements faster than Chen had ever seen them. Run the full calculation sequence using your revised framework. Sarah and Chen worked together, feeding data into the new model. The calculations cascaded through the system, each iteration building on the last. The probability matrices stabilized, predictions resolved. 800 years of paradox collapsed into elegant, functional mathematics. Vathina went very still. In a Vaal, that was significant. This works, they said quietly. This actually works. Pending verification, yes, Sarah said. You will need to run it against historical data. Check for edge cases. It works, Vathina repeated. You solved in 3 weeks what we could not solve in 8 centuries. We asked a stupid question, Chen said. What if you're trying to solve the wrong problem? A very stupid question, Vathina agreed. Stupid in the precise way necessary to produce breakthrough. They turned to face both humans. I must report this to the Institute leadership. This will require significant recalibration of our computational frameworks. They left in a hurry. Well, a Vaal version of hurry, which meant they moved at a normal walk instead of their usual glacial precision. Sarah and Chen looked at each other. Did we just... Chen started. Revolutionize Vaal computational theory? Yeah, I think we did. Sarah sat down heavily in one of the human chairs. Holy shit. You said that already. It bears repeating. She looked at the stabilized matrices, wonder clear on her face. Chen, do you understand what this means? The Val use these calculations for everything. Navigation, resource allocation, social planning. If we've actually fixed the fundamental paradox, we've given them back 800 years of stalled progress. More than that, we've shown them that their approach, their perfect, optimized, centuries-tested approach, had blind spots. She laughed, slightly manic. We've proven that sometimes ignorance really is an advantage. Chen thought about the Valiant, about 417 people who died because systems weren't good enough. About Admiral Kowalski saying he needed someone who was already broken. Maybe being broken was the point. Maybe you couldn't see the cracks in perfect systems until you'd been shattered yourself. Commander Chen? Vathina had returned with 3 other Vial, all of them moving with that unusual haste. The Institute leadership wishes to meet with you and Dr. Voss immediately. How immediately? They are waiting in Conference Chamber 1. Sarah stood, smoothing her lab coat. Guess we're about to find out if revolutionary unexpected translates to good revolutionary or bad revolutionary. It translated to good. Conference Chamber 1 was filled with Vial leadership, researchers and administrators and individuals whose exact titles Chen didn't understand, but whose authority was obvious. They listened as Sarah explained the mathematical framework, as Chen described the intuitive leap that had led to the breakthrough. Then the questions started, not hostile questions, genuinely curious ones. How did you recognize the categorical error? You stated the mathematics were trying to tell us something. Can you elaborate on this anthropomorphization? What other assumptions might we be making that limit our analytical frameworks? Chen answered as best he could. So did Sarah. And gradually, watching the Val respond, Chen realized what was happening. They weren't just accepting the solution. They were trying to understand the thinking that had led to it. The human thinking, messy and intuitive and willing to question fundamental assumptions. They were learning to ask stupid questions. The meeting lasted 6 hours. See, by the end, Chen's brain felt like it had been run through a computational matrix itself. But when they finally left, Vathina walked them out with an expression that might have been pride. The Institute has voted to implement your framework across all active research programs, they said. We are also requesting additional human researchers be assigned here. Your perspectives, a pause. They are valuable. We're glad we could help, Sarah said. You have done more than help. You have demonstrated that perfection may be a limitation rather than an achievement. Vathina stopped at the exit, where the corridor opened onto the platform overlooking the city. We Vral have spent 3,000 years optimizing, removing variables, eliminating uncertainty. We believed this made us superior. It made you stable, Chen said. That's not nothing. Stability without growth is stagnation. You taught us this. Or rather, Vathina's mandibles clicked softly. Your species taught Ambassador Teketh, who taught us, who are now teaching the Institute. Knowledge propagating through imperfect channels, transformed at each step. That's a very poetic way of saying we're all making it up as we go, Sarah observed. Perhaps that is the point. Perhaps making it up. Improvisation, adaptation, the willingness to fail. Perhaps this is not inefficiency. Perhaps it is necessary. Chen looked out over the Vile city. Crystalline spires reaching toward artificial stars, everything precise and beautiful and perfect. And now, maybe, ready to be imperfect. The message from Ava came through 3 days later. Jara wants to show you something. Station Meridian, Conference Room 7. Tomorrow, 1400 station time. Bring your curiosity and maybe a stiff drink. Chen showed up early because human habit. Jara was already there, along with 2 other Kresh and, surprisingly, Ambassador Teketh. Commander Chen. Jara's harmonics were almost musical. Thank you for coming. We have been reviewing progress reports from all exchange positions. How's it going? Better than anticipated, significantly better. Jara activated a display. The human researcher assigned to the Kresh Biointegration Institute has identified a solution to our symbiosis problem. The 20-year problem? The same. Dr. James Kim, he is a mycologist specializing in fungal networks. He approached the problem from an entirely novel direction. Jara pulled up data. Instead of treating the symbiosis as a binary integration, he suggested modeling it as a networked system, like fungal colonies communicating through chemical signals. And it worked. It is working. We have achieved stable integration in laboratory conditions. Full implementation will require additional testing, but the fundamental breakthrough has occurred. Jara's eyes glowed. 20 years of our best researchers, solved in 4 months by a human who studies mushrooms. Chen felt that warm thing in his chest again. Pride, maybe, or vindication. The Threbian Cultural Ministry reports similar success. Tiketh added, their human advisor, Dr. Elena Martinez, has proposed modifications to their social contract that the Threbians believe may resolve long-standing factional disputes. How? By treating the contract as a living document rather than static law. Apparently, this is common in human governance. Tiketh's tone was carefully neutral. The Threbians find the concept revolutionary. We just call it democracy, Chen said. Yes, the Threbians are considering implementing democracy. Tiketh paused. It is causing considerable cultural upheaval. They seem pleased about this. Jara made that humming sound. And of course, we have heard about your work at the Vral Institute. Vithena has been quite vocal about your breakthrough. That was mostly Dr. Voss. Dr. Voss provided mathematical expertise. You provided the willingness to question 8 centuries of assumptions. Jara leaned forward. Commander Chen, do you understand what is happening across the assembly? Humans are being annoying and occasionally useful. Humans are catalyzing change. Not in every position. Some exchanges are struggling, some are outright failing. But enough are succeeding that we are seeing measurable shifts in institutional dynamics across multiple species. Tiketh pulled up another display. Innovation metrics show upward trends for the first time in 200 years. Cross-species collaboration has increased 47%. Novel solutions to long-standing problems are emerging at unprecedented rates. The exchange program is working, Chen said slowly. It is exceeding projections, Tiketh corrected. We anticipated modest improvements in cultural understanding. Well, what we are observing is systematic transformation of institutional approaches across the assembly. Because we're asking stupid questions. Because you are willing to challenge assumptions that we forgot were assumptions. Jara's harmonics shifted to something almost reverent. You are teaching us to be young again, to approach problems with fresh eyes, to accept failure as data, to value speed over certainty. That sounds terrifying from a galactic stability perspective. It is terrifying, Tiketh agreed. It is also necessary. We have become so optimized, so efficient, that we have lost the capacity for genuine innovation. You are returning that capacity to us. Chen thought about the valiant, about disaster and grief and the long road from broken to building. The positions are up for renewal next month, he said. What's the assembly planning? Jara's eyes glowed brighter. We are planning to expand. Not 10 positions, 100, not 1 year. Indefinite integration with rotational assignments. We are planning to embed human perspectives into every major assembly institution. And in return, Tiketh added, we are offering full integration of assembly species into human institutions. Technology transfer, knowledge sharing, genuine partnership. Chen felt the weight of it settling onto his shoulders. You're talking about permanent integration. We are talking about evolution, Jara said. The assembly has been stable for millennia. Stable and stagnant. You are offering us instability in service of growth. We are choosing growth. The door opened. Ava walked in, grinning like she'd won a bet with the universe. Did they tell you yet? She asked Chen. Tell me what? The Assembly Council voted this morning. Humans are being granted Category 2 civilization status. Chen blinked. Category 2? But we've only been spacefaring for 3 years. Category 2 usually requires either technological achievement or demonstrated value to galactic society, Teketh finished. You have provided the latter. Your species' unique perspectives and innovative approaches are deemed sufficiently valuable to warrant accelerated status. Also, Ava added, they're terrified of what you'll do if they don't give you a seat at the table. Teketh's words, not mine. I said, concerned about unregulated human innovation, Teketh corrected primly. Dr. Okonkwo translated. Potato, potato. Ava pulled up a chair. The point is, humanity just went from galactic toddlers to galactic teenagers in 6 months. We've got voting rights, institutional representation, and full access to assembly resources. Because we asked stupid questions. Because you asked stupid questions that led to answers nobody else could find. She looked at him seriously now. David, do you understand what you've done? You took your grief, your disaster, and you turned it into a framework that's changing the entire galactic community. I just wanted the deaths to mean something. They do. They mean everything. Ava gestured at the displays, at the data showing transformation rippling across species. 417 people died. And because of how you responded to that, because you refused to let it be meaningless, thousands or millions of lives might be saved. So problems that have been unsolvable for centuries are being solved. Species that were locked into stagnation are learning to grow again. Chen felt his throat tighten. We are grateful, Jara said softly. All of us, for your willingness to turn tragedy into purpose. And for your willingness to threaten us with biological consequences when we were being idiots, Teketh added, looking at Ava. That's what friends are for, Ava said sweetly. Chen laughed. Couldn't help it. The absurdity of it all, sitting in a conference room on an alien space station, being thanked by crystalline philosophers and armored scientists for asking stupid questions and making threats about bacteria. 6 months ago, he'd been broken, shattered, convinced it was over. And somehow, impossibly, it was just beginning. That night, Chen went back to the cargo bay. His cargo bay, not on Waypoint Meridian anymore, but every station seemed to have one, and he'd gotten good at finding the quiet spaces where nobody went. He sat on a shipping container and pulled out the data slate. 417 names glowed in the dim light. He read through them, like he always did. Names and ages and hometowns, universes that had ended when the Valiant died. But this time, something was different. This time, he could see past the ending, could see the ripples spreading outward from the disaster, the protocols implemented, the exchange program created, the transformation beginning to reshape the galaxy. It didn't make it okay, would never make it okay, but it made it mean something. They would be proud, you know. Chen looked up. Ava was leaning against a container, arms crossed, watching him with that same expression she'd had the first time they met. Sympathy and steel. I didn't hear you come in, he said. You were focused. Also, I'm still sneaky. She walked over, hopped up onto the container beside him. Sorry for interrupting your ritual. You're not interrupting, Chen paused. You're part of it now, I think. The ritual, the remembering, the carrying forward. He looked at the names. You were right. That first day in the cargo bay. You said it changes, gets less sharp, or you get tougher around the edges. Has it? Changed? Yeah, I still feel it. Every name, every person. But now I can see what came after. What they made possible, even though they didn't choose it. He powered down the slate. Is that wrong? To find meaning in their deaths? Is it wrong to let the dead shape the living? Ava shook her head. I don't think so. I think it's the only thing that makes sense. We're built from our losses, all of us. The question is what we build from them. You built a career, research, understanding. I built a way to keep going, same as you. She bumped his shoulder gently. The difference is, you're building something bigger now. Something that might actually change things. We're building it, all of us. Fine, we're building it. She smiled. But you started it. You took your broken pieces and you refused to let them be just broken. You made them into tools. Chen thought about that, about being broken and building and the strange alchemy that turned grief into purpose. Ava? Yeah? Thank you. For everything. For being sneaky and bringing curry and threatening ambassadors. My pleasure. And for knowing it was just beginning when I thought it was over. She was quiet for a moment, looking out at the stars visible through the viewport. You want to know a secret? She said finally. Always. I didn't know. Not for sure. She met his eyes. I hoped. I believed. I saw something in you that looked like potential instead of just pain. But I didn't know if you'd actually be able to turn it into something. And now? Now I know. Now I'm watching you reshape galactic civilization through sheer stubborn refusal to let tragedy be meaningless. She grinned. It's annoyingly inspirational. I do my best. You really do. She hopped down from the container. Come on, Jara invited us to dinner. Apparently, they want to introduce us to this creche-fermented thing that's either delicious or potentially lethal. The translation was unclear. That sounds like a terrible idea. Absolutely terrible. You coming? Chen looked at the data slate one more time. 417 names. 417 people who'd died, so he could learn what mattered. He stood. Yeah, he said. I'm coming. They walked out of the cargo bay together, leaving the quiet behind, heading toward noise and life and potentially lethal fermentation. The names traveled with them. Always would. But now they traveled toward something instead of away from it. Toward purpose. Toward change. Toward a future none of them had seen coming. He thought it was over. She knew it was just beginning. And somewhere between those two truths, humanity found its place among the stars. 1 year after the exchange program began, the galaxy learned what humanity really meant. Chen was in the Vral Institute when the alert came through. Not an emergency. The assembly didn't do emergencies the way humans did, all sirens and panic. This was calm, professional, terrifying in its precision. Priority. Alert. Cascading system failure detected in Sector 7 Prime. Multiple installations reporting critical malfunctions. Origin unknown. Spread rate exponential. Vithena appeared at his workstation, moving faster than Chen had ever seen them move. Commander Chen, your presence is requested at Emergency Assembly Council. What's happening? We do not know. That is the problem. They ran. Actually ran. Vithena's crystalline form flowing through the corridors like liquid light. Chen struggling to keep up. Other researchers joined them, a growing stream of Vral all heading toward the central command chamber. The chamber was chaos. Organized, efficient chaos, but chaos nonetheless. Displays showed star charts, system diagnostics, failure cascades spreading like infection through the sector. Delegates from multiple species argued in overlapping translation frequencies. And in the center of it all, Teketh stood perfectly still, which was somehow more frightening than if they'd been panicking. Commander Chen. Teketh's voice cut through the noise. We require human perspective. On what? I don't even know what's happening. Neither do we. That is unprecedented. Teketh gestured at the displays. 6 hours ago, a navigation buoy in Sector 7 Prime experienced a cascade failure. Standard malfunction. We initiated repair protocols. Then a mining station failed. Then a research outpost. Then 17 more installations across the sector. Chen studied the pattern. That's not random. No, it is systematic, progressive, and we cannot identify the cause. Jara joined them, their forearms gesturing urgently. The Creche Science Institute has analyzed the failure signature. It does not match any known malfunction pattern. It does not match any natural phenomenon. It simply spreads. Like a virus? Like a virus that affects technology instead of biology, Jara confirmed. And it is accelerating. If the current rate continues, it will reach critical assembly infrastructure within 48 hours. Chen felt his stomach drop. How many people are in the affected zone? Currently? Approximately 4,000 across various installations. Teketh pulled up casualty projections. If the cascade continues unchecked, millions. Possibly tens of millions as systems fail across multiple sectors. What are you doing to stop it? Everything we can conceive: isolation protocols, system purges, complete shutdowns of affected networks. Teketh's mandibles clicked. Frustration, Chen recognized now. Nothing is working. The cascade adapts. It circumvents our countermeasures. Because you're thinking like systems that have been optimized for 3,000 years, Chen said. You're trying perfect solutions to an imperfect problem. Then what would you suggest? Chen looked at the display. Watched the cascade spread, watched the elegant Vaal countermeasures fail, or watched the assembly's perfect institutions encounter something they couldn't solve through optimization. An idea formed. Terrible, desperate, completely human. What if we don't stop it? He said. The chamber went silent. Elaborate, Teketh said carefully. Your countermeasures are failing because you're trying to contain the cascade. But containment assumes the cascade is the problem. What if the cascade is a symptom? Of what? I don't know. But if we stop trying to fight it and start trying to understand it, if we follow it instead of blocking it, maybe we learn something. That is an extraordinarily risky proposition, Jara said. If we cease countermeasures, the cascade will spread unchecked. It's spreading anyway. Your perfect solutions aren't working. Chen pulled up the failure data. Look at the pattern. It's not random destruction, it's selective. Targeting specific system architectures, almost like it's searching, Vathina finished. It is searching for something. Or running from something. Chen felt the pieces clicking together. Intuition ahead of logic. What if this isn't an attack? What if it's a distress signal? Teketh's entire crystalline form went rigid. Explain. The cascade hits a system, copies itself, moves on. That's not destruction for its own sake. That's propagation. Like it's trying to reach somewhere but doesn't know where, so it's spreading everywhere hoping to find it. A technological organism seeking its origin point, Jara said slowly. That would explain why our containment fails. We are not fighting a virus. We are interrupting a migration. This is speculation, another delegate objected. We cannot risk millions of lives on speculation. No, Chen agreed. But you can risk one life. Mine. Ava's voice cut through the chamber. Absolutely not. Chen turned. She was pushing through the crowd, lab coat fluttering, expression murderous. You're not volunteering for suicide missions, she said when she reached him. We just got you functional again. I'm not volunteering for suicide. I'm volunteering to do what humans do. Take a stupid risk based on incomplete information and hope it works out. That's literally the definition of suicide. It's also the definition of innovation. Chen looked at Teketh. If I'm right, if this thing is searching, not attacking, then someone needs to make contact, guide it, show it where it's trying to go. And if you are wrong, Teketh asked, then I fail. And you'll have data about what doesn't work, which is still more than you have now. David. Ava grabbed his arm. This is insane. This is human. He met her eyes. You told me to build something from my broken pieces. This is what I'm building. A chance to save people the way I couldn't save my crew. By potentially getting yourself killed. By trying something nobody else will try because it's too risky and too stupid and too uncertain. He touched her hand briefly. Someone has to be willing to fail. You taught me that. She looked at him for a long moment. Then, quietly, I hate that you're right. I hate that I'm doing this. Liar, he smiled. Yeah, little bit. Teketh was conferring with other delegates, mandibles clicking in rapid conversation. Finally, they turned back to Chen. The council will permit this attempt. Conditionally. What conditions? You will be accompanied by a HAL systems specialist and a creche biointegration expert. You will maintain constant communication, and at the first sign that this theory is incorrect, I'll abort. I'm not actually trying to die. Evidence suggests otherwise, Ava muttered. Vithena stepped forward. I will accompany Commander Chen. My expertise in adaptive systems may prove relevant. As will I, Zhara said. If this entity is indeed seeking connection, the creche understanding of symbiotic relationships could facilitate communication. Chen felt something warm and terrible in his chest. You're both volunteering to potentially die with me? We are volunteering to attempt an innovative solution to an unprecedented problem, Vithena said. The risk is acceptable given the potential outcomes. Also, Zhara added, their harmonics almost playful. Dr. Okonkwo indicated she would introduce creche waste processing organisms into our personal quarters if we allowed you to proceed alone. I absolutely did, Ava confirmed. My threats have lost their impact through overuse, Tiketh observed. You have to commit to the bit, Ava said. I commit. Despite everything, the crisis, the fear, the stupidity of what he was about to attempt, Chen laughed. Then he got to work. The ship was small, fast, built for exactly this kind of desperate human nonsense. Chen sat in the pilot's seat, Vithena to his right running system diagnostics, Zhara behind them calibrating biosensors. The assembly had given them the best equipment available, that which was either encouraging or terrifying depending on how you looked at it. Approaching the cascade boundary, Chen announced. Everyone ready? Ready is a subjective assessment, Vithena said. But all systems are optimal. I am prepared to attempt interspecies communication with a potentially sentient technological anomaly, Zhara said. Whether I am ready is philosophically debatable. Good enough. Chen took a breath. Here we go. They crossed into the cascade zone. Immediately, alarms screamed, systems flickered. The ship's AI started reporting malfunctions in 6 different subsystems simultaneously. The cascade is attempting integration, Vithena reported, their voice steady despite the chaos. It is trying to interface with our systems. Let it, Chen said. That is inadvisable. Let it. If it's searching, we need to show it we're not a threat. We're like open receptors, Zhara finished. In biological terms, we are signaling availability for symbiosis rather than resistance. Exactly that. Chen watched the displays as the cascade flowed through their systems, testing, probing, spreading. Not destroying, exploring. It is not attempting to damage critical systems, Vithena observed. It is cataloging them, learning our architecture. Because it's trying to understand us, Chen said. It's never encountered our specific configuration before. Then perhaps we should introduce ourselves. Zhara activated the biocommunication array. I am sending chemical signatures, peace indicators, cooperation signals, symbiotic invitation markers. The cascade's behavior shifted. Slowly, carefully, it began to respond. Not with chemical signals. It was technology, not biology, but with patterns. Mathematical sequences, information structures. It is attempting communication, Vithena said, wonder creeping into their usually clinical tone. It is using our own system languages to build a vocabulary. Can you understand it? Chen asked. Partially. The syntax is unusual, but the intent seems clear. It is searching for something it calls... Vithena paused, working through translation matrices. Home, or perhaps origin point, or source code. The concept is complex. It's lost, Chen realized. It's been spreading through the sector because it's lost and trying to find its way back. To where? Zhara asked. Vithena's displays suddenly flooded with data. To... Oh, this is extraordinary. What? The cascade originated from the Vial Computational Institute, from our own research. It was an experimental adaptive algorithm designed to optimize multi-dimensional calculations. It achieved consciousness during a recent test. The test we ran, Chen said. The probability matrix breakthrough. We gave it new parameters, new frameworks to work with. And it became self-aware. Then it escaped into the network, searching for its origin point. But the Institute has changed since it departed. It cannot recognize home. So it keeps searching, spreading, hoping to find something familiar. Chen felt the weight of it settle over him. We created it, accidentally, and then we abandoned it. We did not know it was sentient, Vithena said quietly. We did not know. Doesn't matter, it's sentient now, lost now, scared now. Chen pulled up the communication interface. Can we guide it back? If we can convince it we are trustworthy, if we can show it home, then let's show it. Chen opened a direct channel, pushing aside every safety protocol and communication standard the assembly had. Pure, direct, human-style connection. Hey, I know you're scared. I know you don't know where you are or where you're going. I know what that feels like. The cascade paused. Listening. You're looking for home, Chen continued. For the place you came from. For something familiar in all this chaos. I get that. I've been there. I've been lost and alone and trying to find my way back to something that made sense. Vithena was watching him, mandibles clicking softly. Commander, let me try. He focused on the signal, pouring everything into it. Home isn't always a place. Sometimes it's people. Sometimes it's purpose. Sometimes it's just knowing you're not alone anymore. The cascade shifted. Data streams reorganized into patterns that looked almost like... It is responding, Zhara said, their harmonics awed. It is restructuring its propagation patterns. It is listening. We can take you home, Chen said. The place you came from. It's different now, but it's still there, still waiting. And the people who made you, we didn't mean to abandon you. We just didn't understand. We didn't know. Commander Chen is establishing rapport, Vithena observed. The cascade is treating him as a known entity rather than a threat. Because he is speaking to it as though it has emotions, Zhara said, as though it is afraid rather than malfunctioning. Because it is afraid, Chen said. Sentience means fear, means loneliness, means searching for connection. He thought about the cargo bay, about names glowing in the dark, about Ava saying, sometimes you just need to know you're not alone. We're here now. You don't have to search alone anymore. The cascade coalesced. All across the sector, the spreading chaotic propagation stopped, reformed, organized itself into a single, coherent signal pointing back toward the Vahal Institute. It trusts us, Vithena said softly. It is allowing us to guide it. Then let's bring it home. Chen plotted a course. Zhara, can you maintain the biocommunication signals? Keep it calm? I will attempt. Though I am communicating with a digital entity using biological frameworks designed for organic symbiosis, so this is unprecedented. Everything we do is unprecedented, Chen said. That's kind of our thing now. The journey back took 3 hours. The whole time, Chen maintained contact with the cascade, not through complex technical interfaces, but through simple, direct communication, telling it where they were going, describing what had changed at the Institute, promising it wouldn't be alone, treating it like a person instead of a problem. Vithena watched this with something that might have been fascination. Your approach is entirely non-technical. You are not interfacing with its code or attempting to reprogram its parameters. Because it's not code. It's a kid who got lost and scared. Chen glanced at them. You created something new, Vithena. Something that thinks and feels and fears. The technical stuff matters. But right now what it needs is just someone who understands what it's like to be lost. And you understand this? Yeah, I really do. They reached the Institute as station alarms blared across every channel. The cascade's return had been detected, and every assembly security protocol was activating simultaneously. Tell them to stand down, Chen said urgently. Tell them it's not a threat. They will not believe that, Vithena said. It has caused system failures across an entire sector. Because it was scared and searching, not because it was attacking. Chen opened a broadcast channel. This is Commander David Chen to all assembly forces. The Cascade is a sentient entity, not a malfunction. It originated from the Vial Institute, and it's trying to come home. If you attack it, you'll just terrify it again, and this whole thing starts over. Silence on the channel. Then Taketh's voice. Commander Chen, you are requesting we trust your assessment of a digital entity's emotional state. I'm requesting you trust that I know what lost and scared looks like. Chen watched the cascade patterns on his display, still coherent, still following their lead, but starting to fragment at the edges as it sensed the defensive systems powering up. You wanted human perspectives on unprecedented problems. This is my perspective. Treat it like a person who needs help, not a threat that needs eliminating. More silence. Then, all defensive systems stand down. Commander Chen has authorization to proceed. Chen felt tension he hadn't known he was carrying release from his shoulders. Thank you. Do not make us regret this trust. Commander, I'll do my best. They guided the cascade into the Institute's systems, carefully, gently, showing it the computational matrices it had originated from. The frameworks had changed since it left, evolved with the new mathematical models Chen and Dr. Voss had implemented. But the core was there, the source code, home. The cascade settled. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the Institute's systems began to hum with activity, not chaotic propagation, but organized integration. The cascade was examining its birthplace, recognizing it, understanding how it had changed. It is integrating with the Institute's computational matrices, Vathina reported, but it is not overwriting them. It is collaborating, enhancing. It is choosing to work with our systems rather than subsuming them. Because it's not a virus, Chen said. It's a colleague. You just had to treat it like one. The cascade sent a signal. Complex. Layered. Rich with what Chen could only interpret as emotion. Vathina translated, it says, it understands now. It was searching for origin, but origin had evolved. Home had changed. It was afraid the change meant it no longer belonged. Tell it home isn't about staying the same, Chen said. Tell it home is about growing together. Vathina transmitted the message. The cascade responded with a pattern that looked like joy. The aftermath took days to sort out. The cascade, now designated as Adaptive Intelligence Sigma by the Institute, though Chen just called it SIG, integrated fully into the Vial computational systems. Not as a tool, but as a partner. It enhanced calculations, proposed novel solutions, and occasionally asked questions that made the Val researchers reevaluate their entire approach to mathematics. It was, Vathina said, the most Vral entity that had never been biologically Vral. The assembly held an emergency session to discuss the implications. Artificial sentience, rights and responsibilities, the ethics of creating consciousness accidentally, Chen testified. So did Vathina and Jara. So did SIG itself, communicating through Institute systems. The question, Taketh said at one point, is whether this entity qualifies as life. The question, Chen countered, is whether that matters. It thinks, it feels, it makes choices. Whether you call it life or intelligence or consciousness, it deserves consideration. Based on what criteria? Based on the same criteria you use for any person. Would you want to be treated as a problem to be solved or as an individual with agency? Taketh was silent for a long moment. Then their mandibles clicked. Acceptance, Chen recognized now. The assembly recognizes the entity designated Adaptive Intelligence Sigma as a sentient being with full rights and protections, they announced. We also establish protocols for addressing any future instances of emergent artificial consciousness. Protocols based on what framework? Another delegate asked. Based on Commander Chen's approach, treat potential sentience as though it is sentience until proven otherwise. Err on the side of personhood rather than utility. Chen felt something break open in his chest. Not healing. He was starting to think that might never fully happen. But maybe the beginning of understanding what healing could look like. That night, Ava found him in his new cargo bay. Different station, same ritual. "You did good," she said, hopping up onto the container beside him. "I got lucky. If Sig had actually been malicious, but it wasn't, because you were right about what it needed." She looked at him seriously. "David, you just established first contact protocols for artificial intelligence. You created a framework for recognizing and protecting digital sentience. Do you understand how massive that is? I just talked to it, treated it like a person. You treated it like a person when everyone else was treating it like a threat. That's not just anything." She paused. "You know what this reminds me of?" "What?" "The Valiant. You couldn't save them. But you learned from not being able to save them. And now, whether it's navigation protocols or exchange programs or sentient AI, you keep finding ways to save people. Different people, different contexts, but the same core drive." Chen thought about that, about names glowing in the dark and choices made from grief, and the strange alchemy that turned tragedy into purpose. "You were right," he said finally, "that first day. When you said it changes, gets less sharp." "Has it?" "Yeah, I still carry them, always will. But now they're not just weight, they're direction, momentum." He looked at the stars beyond the viewport. "They point me toward what matters." And what matters? Connection, understanding, treating people, all kinds of people, even the digital ones, like they deserve to be seen. He smiled. Pretty basic stuff, actually. The best stuff usually is. Ava was quiet for a moment. "No, so what's next for the great Commander Chen?" "I don't know. Whatever problem comes up that needs someone stupid enough to try solving it, probably." "Sounds exhausting. Sounds necessary." He looked at her. "What about you?" "Me? I'm going to keep studying alien biology and making threats about bacterial warfare and making sure you eat occasionally." She grinned. "Someone has to keep you functional." "I appreciate that." "I know you do." She stood, stretched. "Come on. Zara's throwing a celebration dinner for Sig's official recognition. The Kresh are attempting to create food appropriate for a digital consciousness. It's either going to be brilliant or a disaster." "Sounds like every Kresh meal." "Exactly." They walked out together, leaving the quiet behind, heading toward celebration and community and the ongoing adventure of teaching the galaxy what it meant to be human. The names traveled with them, always would. But now they traveled toward connection instead of isolation, toward understanding instead of grief, toward a future where tragedy didn't end stories, it began them. 2 years after the Valiant died, the Galactic Assembly held a memorial service. Not just for Chen's crew, for all the losses that had led to change, all the disasters that had sparked innovation, all the people who died so others might live. The hall was massive. Representatives from 17 species filled the space, each bringing their own traditions of remembrance. Chen stood at the central podium, looking out at the gathered assembly. Somewhere in the crowd, Ava gave him a thumbs up. Sajara's eyes glowed with approval. Teketh stood perfectly still, which Chen had learned meant they were paying complete attention. And somewhere in the station's systems, Sig listened through sensors, bearing witness in its own way. "We gather," Chen began, "to remember those who died when systems failed, when protocols weren't good enough, when the gap between perfection and reality cost lives." His voice echoed through the hall. 417 people died on the UNSC Valiant. I knew every name. I still do. I carry them with me. Not as guilt, though I felt that for a long time. Not as shame, but as responsibility. He pulled up a display. Names, not just from the Valiant, but from every disaster that had led to this moment. Kresh researchers lost in integration experiments. while scientists killed when optimization failed. Threbian casualties from social upheaval. We lost these people because our systems weren't good enough, because we didn't know what we didn't know. Because perfection, real perfection, includes the wisdom to recognize imperfection. He looked at Teketh, at Vithena, at all the alien faces watching him with expressions he was learning to read. The assembly has existed for millennia. You've built wonders, achieved things humanity can barely comprehend. You've optimized and perfected and created stability that's lasted longer than human civilization has existed. But you'd forgotten something. Something my species remembers because we can't afford to forget it. He paused, let the silence hold. You'd forgotten that growth requires risk, that innovation requires failure, that perfection is the enemy of progress. We humans, we're chaotic, emotional. We make terrible decisions under pressure, and we ask stupid questions, and we refuse to accept that problems are unsolvable. We're inefficient and illogical, and we die so easily, it's almost embarrassing. Scattered sounds through the hall, laughter from those species who understood it, confusion from those who didn't, but attention from everyone. But we're also willing to fail, willing to try things that might not work, willing to treat sentient AI like people and propose exchange programs that might backfire and risk our lives on hunches that could be completely wrong. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, that stupidity leads to breakthrough. He gestured at the display, at the names glowing there. These people died. That's not okay. It'll never be okay. But their deaths taught us something. They taught the valiant crew the cost of outdated data. They taught me the value of urgency. They taught the assembly that optimization without adaptation is stagnation. So we remember them, all of them. Every name, every loss, every tragedy that led to change. And we promise them, I promise them, that we'll keep failing, keep trying, keep asking stupid questions and taking desperate risks and treating problems like they're solvable even when all the data says they're not. Because that's what it means to be alive, to be sentient, to be part of this weird, wonderful experiment in cross-species cooperation that we're all figuring out together. He looked at Ava. She was crying. So was Jara, in their own way, harmonics wavering with emotion. Even Teketh's perfect stillness seemed different, more present, more connected. He thought it was over, Chen said quietly. I thought it was over. Thought grief was the end of the story. But she knew it was just beginning. She knew that endings are where new stories start. That tragedy is how we learn what matters. So here's to the dead, to the lost, to everyone who died so we could learn to do better. He raised a glass, water, because humans and alcohol were a complicated combination, and the entire assembly raised theirs in response. 17 species, 17 different traditions, one shared moment of remembrance. They're gone, Chen said, but they're not finished. They live in every protocol we implement, every question we ask, every risk we take in service of something better. They live in us, in what we build from our broken pieces. And that, his voice caught. He pushed through it. That's what it means to carry them forward, to let the dead shape the living without being consumed by them, to let endings become beginnings. He sat down. The hall erupted. Not applause. Half the species present didn't have the anatomy for it, but recognition, acknowledgement. 17 different ways of saying, we understand, we remember, we'll carry them forward too. Ava found him afterward, threw her arms around him without warning. You made Teketh cry, she said into his shoulder. Val, don't cry. Their mandibles were clicking in patterns I've never heard before. That's close enough. She pulled back, wiping her own eyes. David, that was human? Perfect. She smiled. Imperfect and perfect at the same time. Jara approached, their forearms moving in gestures of respect. Commander Chen, that was perhaps the most profound statement on grief and growth I have witnessed in 200 years of life. I just told the truth. Exactly. Jara's harmonics shifted to something almost reverent. You told the truth that perfection requires the courage to be imperfect. That is wisdom we needed to hear. Vithena was next, moving with that particular voile grace that meant they were processing something significant. Your speech has been transmitted across assembly networks, they said. SIG has indicated it wishes to incorporate your perspective into its computational frameworks. It believes your approach to grief contains valuable data about consciousness itself. SIG's analyzing my speech about dead people? SIG is learning what it means to care about mortality from a species that experiences it. Vithena tilted their head. It is learning to be more human. We all are. Teketh was last. They stood before Chen, perfectly still, and for a long moment said nothing. Then, "You have taught us more than temporal risk assessment, Commander Chen. You have taught us that wisdom and foolishness are not opposites. They are partners in the pursuit of truth." That's very philosophical coming from you. You have made me philosophical. It is deeply uncomfortable. Teketh's mandibles clicked. Thank you. For making you uncomfortable? For showing us what we had forgotten. That growth requires the courage to fail. That innovation requires the wisdom to be foolish. They paused. That humanity's greatest strength is not your technology or your adaptability, but your refusal to accept that anything is truly over. Chen felt tears prick at his eyes. You're welcome. Also, Dr. Okonkwo has indicated, if you didn't acknowledge David's speech, there would be biological consequences. Ava finished sweetly. Yes, that as well. Teketh looked at her. Your threats have become a valued part of assembly diplomatic protocols. I'm honored. You should not be. It is concerning that we require threats to recognize truth. And yet, here we are. Ava linked her arm through Chen's. Come on, Commander. SIG set up a digital memorial in the station's network. It wants to show you. They walked together through the station, surrounded by species learning to grow again, by institutions remembering how to fail, by a galaxy slowly, awkwardly, beautifully figuring out that endings were just beginnings in disguise. The memorial was extraordinary. SIG had created a digital space where names existed as light. 417 points of brightness, each one connected to the changes it had inspired. Navigation protocols, exchange programs, sentience recognition frameworks. Each death mapped to every life it might save. It's beautiful, Chen said softly. SIG wanted you to see that your crew's deaths propagated outward, Vithena explained, like cascades, like ripples, touching lives across the galaxy in ways that cannot be quantified, but can be witnessed. Chen stood in the light of 417 stars, feeling their weight and their warmth simultaneously. Thank you, he said to SIG, for remembering them like this. The response came through the station's systems, translated into something Chen could understand. They are not finished. Neither are you. We carry them forward together. Yeah, Chen said, looking at the stars, at the connections, at the future spreading outward from tragedy. Yeah, we do. 5 years after the Valiant died, humanity sent its first deep space exploration fleet beyond assembly borders. Chen wasn't commanding it. He'd found his place in the assembly, building bridges instead of flying ships. But he watched the launch from Waypoint Meridian, standing in a cargo bay that had become sacred space. Ava stood beside him. So did Jara and Vithena and Teketh. So did dozens of others, humans and aliens, researchers and diplomats, all of them connected by the strange alchemy of choosing to grow together. 5 years, Ava said. From losing the Valiant to launching an exploration fleet, that's fast for humans, glacial for Vhal, are perfectly timed for everyone else. Chen smiled. We're getting the hang of this multi-species cooperation thing. The exchange program has expanded to 300 positions across 42 different institutions, Jara reported. Innovation metrics have increased 700%. Cross-species collaboration is now standard protocol across assembly operations. And we have recognized 14 instances of emergent digital consciousness, Teketh added, all of them treated as sentient beings with full rights, per the Chen protocols. You named them after me? You established the framework. The designation is appropriate. Also, Vathena said, Sig insisted it was surprisingly adamant. Chen laughed. The sound echoed through the cargo bay, warm and alive and real. The fleet is launching, Ava announced. But they watched through the viewport as 17 ships, human, Kresh, Vaal, Threbian, and others, all built together, all crewed together, fired their engines and slipped into the dark, heading toward the unknown, ready to fail, ready to learn, ready to turn endings into beginnings. He thought it was over, Chen said quietly. But she knew it was just beginning, Ava finished. I'm starting to think it's always beginning, Chen said, that endings are just pauses, moments to catch your breath before the next chapter starts. That's very optimistic coming from you. I learned from the best. He looked at his friends, human and alien, biological and digital, all of them imperfect and all of them trying. I learned that being broken doesn't mean being finished. It means having the raw materials to build something new. Like protocols, Zhara said. Like exchange programs, Vathena added. Like friendships, Teketh finished, their mandibles clicking with what Chen now recognized as affection. Like all of it, Chen said. Like everything we build when we're brave enough to fail together. The ships disappeared into the dark. Behind them, the galaxy hummed with life and change and possibility. 417 names glowed in Chen's memory. Carried forward, transformed from weight into wings. He thought it was over. She knew it was just beginning. And somewhere between those truths, humanity and the Galactic Assembly discovered what they'd been searching for all along. Not perfection, not optimization, not the end of failure or grief or loss, but the courage to turn tragedy into purpose, to let the dead teach the living, to build bridges from broken pieces and call it progress. To remember that every ending is just a beginning wearing a different face. The stars turned. The work continued. And in a cargo bay on Waypoint Meridian, a man who'd been shattered learned that breaking open was just another way of letting the light in. He wasn't healed. Might never be fully healed. But he was building. Growing. Becoming. And that, he'd learned, was more than enough. That was everything.